The stars had always held a certain mystery, twinkling like distant whispers from the past. In the vastness of space, civilizations rose and fell, each empire believing itself to be eternal. Among them, the Droo Empire was the most feared, a vast, powerful force that had conquered countless worlds. With their advanced technology, they thought nothing could stand in their way. The galaxy had bowed before them, and they expected no less from the next. But there was one thing the Droo Empire did not anticipate: humanity. For years, Earth had been watching from the edges of known space, quietly observing the events unfolding in the galaxy. The human race had always been underestimated by the great empires thought to be a weak, unimportant species, barely able to hold its own. But the truth was different. Humanity had been building, learning, and preparing in secret. The galaxy's biggest mistake was thinking humans would stay weak and helpless forever. It was in the quiet darkness of space, when the stars were hidden by a cloud of gas and dust, that humanity made its move. The transmission came without warning, a simple message broadcast to the farthest reaches of Droo space. It was brief and direct, its meaning clear. The message was not a plea, nor a threat, just a warning. It was the kind of message that left a chill in the air, one that made even the strongest empires pause and think. We are watching. Leave our galaxy or face the consequences. At first, the galaxy took little notice. Who would dare defy the Droo Empire? A race of humans, a species barely out of their primitive ways, sending a warning. It was laughable. The Droo Empire had wiped out countless civilizations, leaving only ashes in their wake. To them, humanity's message was a joke. But this time, the joke was on them. The Droo military, proud and confident in their superiority, dismissed the message as nothing more than a petty challenge from a lesser species. Their commanders laughed, their voices echoing through the grand warships and sprawling military stations. They were about to teach the humans a lesson they would never forget. Yet, something felt different. The message was sent across all communication channels, not just to the military leaders, but to every soldier, every officer. It resonated like a cold wind sweeping through the empire. For a moment, a brief moment, even the Droo felt a slight unease. But that feeling was quickly erased by arrogance. They had destroyed empires before what was one human message to them. Without hesitation, the Droo Empire mobilized its forces. Massive warships, each a floating city of death, began to leave their stations. They were armed with the finest weapons. The galaxy had ever seen blasters capable of erasing entire planets, energy shields that could withstand the fiercest attacks, and armies that could sweep through any resistance. The Droo commanders issued orders with practiced ease. The humans would learn what true power was, but unbeknownst to the Empire, humanity had already set its plans in motion. Humanity's response was not one of brute force. Instead of sending their fleets into space to engage in a futile battle, they waited, they watched, they prepared. They knew the Droo would underestimate them, and they counted on it. The galaxy believed that humans were still confined to their homeworld. But in secret, Earth had built a fleet far more powerful than anyone could imagine. This fleet wasn't built for war in the traditional sense. It wasn't designed to overpower the Droo with firepower. No, this fleet had been designed to tap into something far older and far more powerful than any weapon the Droo had ever seen. As the Droo prepared for their inevitable victory, the human fleet gathered, silent and unseen. They were small in numbers, but their technology was not of this age. Ancient knowledge had been recovered from long-forgotten archives, and Earth had learned to harness powers that no one in the galaxy had ever dreamed of. The humans had learned to manipulate energy on a scale that the Droo could never hope to match. The Droo's laughter grew louder as their ships crossed the boundaries of human space, advancing deeper into the unknown regions. They expected an easy victory, but all the while they were unaware that they were walking straight into a trap that would change the course of history forever. The human fleet, though small in comparison to the Droo's massive warships, was ready. It had been engineered to utilize cutting-edge technologies, silent, almost undetectable to traditional sensors. As the Droo ships entered the human-controlled zone of space, they began to experience strange disruptions. Their weapon systems flickered, communications broke down. The great Empire's war machine, built to perfection, suddenly began to stutter, like a finely tuned engine misfiring. At first, the Droo commanders thought it was a malfunction. After all, what could go wrong? They were in control. They were the masters of space. But soon, they began to realize that something was wrong. The humans, far from being weak and unprepared, were causing these problems with ease. The Droo fleet had just entered a territory they didn't understand, one where their technology was rendered useless, and they were being hunted by a force they couldn't even see. As the Droo scrambled to regain control, the eerie silence grew. There were no battle cries, no explosions, no blasts of energy. Just the quiet hum of the stars and the unsettling feeling that something much larger was about to unfold. The humans had made their move, and the Droo were walking straight into their trap. It was no longer a matter of just a warning. The message humanity had sent wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. A promise that the Droo Empire, for all its might, would soon disappear. In the distance, far beyond the human fleet, the stars seemed to hold their breath, waiting for what was coming next. The galaxy was about to change, and the Droo Empire would soon realize just how wrong they had been about humanity. Asterisk, as the vast and seemingly invincible warships of the Droo Empire entered human space, the atmosphere grew tense. The silence of space was unnerving. The humans had never intended to strike first, and yet their presence in the galaxy had shifted something unseen. The Droo, so sure of their dominance, now felt an inexplicable unease. They had expected a simple confrontation, but as their massive ships drifted deeper into the unknown, their confidence began to waver. The Droo fleet continued on its predetermined path, their weapons ready, their soldiers eager for battle. Their commanders barked orders over the comms, pushing the fleet forward with relentless certainty. But the longer they stayed within the confines of human-controlled space, the more something felt wrong. The sensors on the Droo ships began to flicker, their systems glitching in strange ways. At first it was small communication. Signals dropped for a split second, a slight ripple in their defensive screens. But those moments grew longer, and the glitches more frequent. "What is going on?" one of the commanders muttered, looking at his console in disbelief. His ship, one of the largest in the Droo fleet, had just experienced a full system reboot for no reason. It wasn't possible. Their technology was state-of-the-art, impervious to basic failures. But here they were, being outmaneuvered by a race they had thought little of. On the flagship of the Droo fleet, Emperor Karis sat upon his throne, staring coldly at the communication screen. He had been briefed on humanity's warning, but he dismissed it as the typical foolishness of a lesser species. The humans had no true power. They had no chance against the might of the Droo. Yet, Despite his cold demeanor, Karis could not shake the nagging feeling that something was very wrong. "Increase speed," he ordered, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "We will show them their place." But as the order was given, the entire fleet experienced a strange phenomenon. The energy levels from their engines began to fluctuate. Wildly, the massive ships slowed, then halted entirely. Some of the smaller vessels lost power completely. The one's mighty engines sputtered and died as if the very core of the fleet was being drained. "Impossible," the chief engineer screamed. "The power systems are being drained from the outside. It's like something is absorbing our energy." Karis stood up, his tall frame towering over his subordinates. "What do you mean something is absorbing our energy? What could possibly do that?" Before anyone could respond, the ship's sensors began to malfunction. The entire fleet had entered a zone where their systems no longer worked as they should. Radar was useless. Communications were down. Even basic navigation was impossible. The galaxy's most powerful military was being brought to its knees by a force they couldn't comprehend. And then, from the silence came a voice. A calm, almost serene voice, not from the humans themselves, but from the very fabric of space surrounding them. "You were warned." The voice echoed through the fleet's communication systems, vibrating across every warship in the Droo fleet. The message was clear, direct, and filled with an overwhelming sense of certainty. Humanity had indeed warned them. They had tried to avoid conflict, to avoid bloodshed, but now there was no going back. The warning was no longer a message, it was a harbinger of something far worse. Karis, who had been all but certain of his empire's supremacy, felt a jolt of panic ripple through him. He had never experienced fear, true, unbridled fear, until now. The power of his fleet was useless. The human fleet had yet to reveal itself, yet there was an undeniable presence that he could feel. It was as if the universe itself was bending around them, tightening its grip. The Droo ships began to move again, but not under their own power. Something was pushing them, not with force, but with an irresistible pull. They tried to activate their thrusters, but no matter what they did, they could not escape this invisible force. The great warships, which had once made the entire galaxy tremble, were now drifting aimlessly like leaves in the wind, and then, one by one, the ships began to disappear. At first, it was subtle. A small scout vessel that had been at the front of the fleet simply vanished from sensors. The crew on board stared in horror as their entire ship seemed to dissolve into nothingness, leaving no trace, not even debris. Before the crew could even react, their voices were cut off, and the ship was gone. "Where did it go?" someone whispered, the fear now creeping into the voices of the once confident Droo officers. But it wasn't just one ship. It was happening to more and more of the fleet. As the Droo tried to regain control, their ships were slowly being erased from existence, one by one. It wasn't an explosion or a weapon. No, it was far worse. The very fabric of their ships was being unraveled, pulled apart by an unseen hand. It was as though humanity had tapped into a power that no one could understand or stop. "Send a distress signal," Karis commanded, his voice shaky. "Send everything we have. We need backup, now." But his command came too late. The distress signal was swallowed by the same invisible force that had claimed their ships. It was like the universe itself was rejecting them, pulling them into oblivion, leaving nothing behind. No escape, no mercy. In the heart of the Droo fleet, panic spread like wildfire. The greatest military force in the galaxy, the pride of the Droo Empire, was crumbling in the face of an invisible enemy. The once confident soldiers were now scrambling, trying to find answers, to find hope in the chaos. And then, in the midst of the destruction, there was silence. The last of the Droo ships were gone, vanished without a trace, swallowed by the vastness of space, leaving only empty space where once their empire had stood. Humanity had sent its warning, and the Droo Empire had ignored it. Now, there was no empire left to speak of. The galaxy was left in stunned silence, not knowing what to make of the events that had just unfolded. The Droo had fallen, but what did it mean for the future? Could humanity, once considered weak and insignificant, really have the power to reshape the galaxy in their image? One thing was certain: the universe would never be the same again. The void of space was silent. In the wake of the Droo Empire's sudden and inexplicable disappearance, an eerie calm washed over the galaxy. The once feared empire had crumbled, like dust, scattered into nothingness without even a hint of battle. No explosions, no final desperate fight, just silence, like the empire had never existed at all. On Earth, hidden deep within the confines of human space, the truth of what had just occurred began to unfold. The galaxy, in its infinite complexity, had underestimated humanity for far too long. The Droo Empire had assumed that their advanced technology and vast warships would be enough to crush the human resistance. But what they failed to recognize was that humanity, with all its flaws, had one thing that no other empire could claim: resilience. And with resilience came the ability to adapt, to learn, to harness knowledge in ways that no one could foresee. In the quiet halls of Earth's Central Command Station, a group of human leaders gathered around a holographic display, watching the aftermath of the Droo Empire's collapse. The faces of those present were tense, their expressions a mix of disbelief and awe. They had prepared for conflict, but this was something entirely different. "The Droo are gone," General Ralan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But how did we do this? How did we pull this off?" Dr. Sarah Miles, one of the leading minds behind humanity's advancements, stood silently for a moment before responding. It wasn't just technology. It wasn't just power or weapons. It was something older, something we've only begun to understand. She activated the holographic projector in the center of the room, and a series of ancient symbols appeared, floating in mid-air. The symbols were unlike anything in the Droo's vast database. They were not part of any known alien language, nor were they from the technology humanity had developed in recent centuries. These symbols were older than any known civilization, even older than the first human settlement on Earth. They came from a forgotten time, a time before even the Droo Empire had risen to power. "We call it the Pulse," Dr. Miles explained. "A force older than anything we've ever encountered. A natural power that exists within the fabric of the universe itself. We discovered it by accident, buried deep within human history, and we've been studying it for centuries." The Droo never stood a chance. The holographic symbols flickered as she spoke, revealing intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The Pulse doesn't just control energy. It doesn't just disrupt systems. It bends the very fabric of reality, altering the structure of space and time. It's not a weapon, at least not in the way the Droo would have understood it. It's a force of nature, and humanity has learned how to wield it. As the room fell silent, General Roland turned to Dr. Miles, his brow furrowed. "But how did we learn to control it? How could we have hidden something like this from the galaxy for so long?" Dr. Miles took a deep breath, the weight of the situation clear in her eyes. We didn't control it. We learned to coexist with it. The pulse is not something that can be mastered in the traditional sense. It's something we've learned to live with, to understand. It's been part of our history, of our culture, for centuries, woven into the fabric of our existence, without us even knowing. The realization hit like a tidal wave. The very essence of human survival, of humanity's future, had been hidden from the rest of the galaxy. The knowledge had always been there, but the Droo Empire, in their arrogance, never thought to look deeper. They had believed themselves invincible, and in doing so, they had blinded themselves to the reality that humanity was not the helpless species they once thought. Meanwhile, out in the stars, the consequences of the Droo Empire's disappearance were being felt throughout the galaxy. Other empires that had once lived in fear of the Droo now faced a strange uncertainty. The void left by their sudden absence was deafening. The galaxy was thrown into chaos as powerful factions struggled to fill the power vacuum. Whispers of a mysterious force that had wiped out the Empire began to spread, though no one knew the truth. Many still believed humanity had merely fought a conventional war and emerged victorious. But others began to realize that something far more powerful than weaponry had been unleashed, as the remnants of the Droo's fleets were discovered, floating aimlessly in deep space, empty and devoid of life. The true extent of the disaster began to sink in. Some of the most advanced ships had been reduced to dust. There were no signs of destruction, no wreckage, no bodies, no debris. It was as if the very essence of the Droo Empire had been erased from existence, back on Earth. Dr. Miles and the team of scientists continued their studies of the pulse. What had begun as a secret weapon had now become a point of great concern. The Droo were gone, but the question remained: was humanity ready to wield this power responsibly? Could they control the very forces of the universe without causing more destruction? The possibility of using the pulse for good was incredible, but so too was the danger of it falling into the wrong hands. "Do we tell the galaxy what we've discovered?" General Roland asked, his voice serious. Dr. Miles shook her head. "Not yet. We don't fully understand it ourselves. The pulse is unpredictable. It could be our salvation, or our undoing. For now, we keep it hidden. We'll use it to protect ourselves, but the rest of the galaxy is not ready for this knowledge." As the leaders of Earth prepared to face the unknown future, one thing was clear. Humanity had not only survived, but had entered a new phase of existence. They were no longer the quiet observers of the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with, wielding a power that could reshape the very foundations of space and time. But as their understanding of the pulse deepened, so did their realization that they were not alone in the universe. Somewhere out there in the stars, other forces were watching. And if humanity's power had been awakened, it was only a matter of time before others would come to challenge them. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity's true power was only just beginning to reveal itself. The universe, vast and infinite, had always been a place of power struggles, dominance, and ruthless conquest. Empires rose and fell, but none had been as feared or as vast as the Droo Empire. Its reach spanned galaxies, its military unmatched, and its leaders believed themselves to be untouchable. Yet, in the span of a single, silent moment, everything had changed. The disappearance of the Droo Empire had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. In the void left behind, uncertainty had bloomed. The other empires, once under the shadow of the Droo, now found themselves scrambling for power, wondering what had caused such an inexplicable event. Some believed it was the humans who had caused it, though no one truly understood how. Most thought it was some cosmic anomaly, a freak accident of space. But as the galaxy moved on, one truth became increasingly clear. Humanity, underestimated for so long, was a force unlike any other. Back on Earth, the leaders who had first unleashed the power of the pulse stood in the control room, watching the remnants of the Droo Empire fade into nothingness. The battle had been quick, precise, and brutal, not one of explosions or lasers, but a silent, invisible force that had taken apart everything the Droo had ever known. The truth was undeniable. The pulse wasn't just a weapon, it was something much more ancient and terrifying, a force that could reshape the very fabric of the universe. As General Roland surveyed the holographic map, his expression grim, he knew humanity had changed the course of history. The Droo were no more, and with them, a whole era of galactic power had vanished. But now, the real question remained. What came next? Do we have any idea how this power works? Roland asked, his voice low. Dr. Miles, standing beside him, turned to face the map as well. Her face was pale, her brow furrowed with concern. Not entirely. We've barely scratched the surface. The pulse is ... unpredictable. We've only just begun to understand its full potential. And that terrifies me. Terrifies you, Roland echoed, his eyes narrowing. We just wiped out the most powerful empire the galaxy has ever known. Humanity should be celebrating right now. Sarah turned to him, her gaze sharp. It's not that simple. The pulse, in the wrong hands, could be catastrophic. It's not just a weapon, it's a force of nature. And nature doesn't always play by our rules. The room fell into silence as everyone absorbed her words. For all their victories, the reality of what they had done was beginning to sink in. The Droo were gone, but the galaxy had not forgotten their power. And now, the question on everyone's mind was who would be next. Far away from Earth, in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, a far different kind of force was stirring. The once mighty galactic councils had been shaken by the sudden disappearance of the Droo Empire. In their place, other empires began to rise, sensing opportunity in the void. The Zorathians, a technologically advanced and ambitious species, were the first to react. For centuries, they had been quietly watching the human race, studying Earth's progress with a sense of detached curiosity. They had known the humans were out there, but the idea that they could have eliminated an entire empire, one of the oldest and most powerful in the galaxy, was more than they could ignore. The Zorathian High Command convened immediately, the news of the Droo Empire's fall sparking heated debate. The humans have done the impossible, Commander Threx said, his voice heavy with concern. We've always underestimated them, but now they have something none of us can even comprehend. We cannot let them grow stronger, High Chancellor replied, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. If what happened to the Droo was not a fluke, then we must prepare for the inevitable. The humans must be contained. If they can erase an empire like the Droo, who's to say they won't come for us next? Contain them, Threx scoffed. Do you think we can contain a species that has already proved it can manipulate space itself? We must try, Valora insisted. We cannot risk allowing them to grow unchecked. The pulse is too dangerous. We must find a way to counter it before it's too late. The debate continued for hours, but one thing was clear. The galaxy was changing, and the Zorathians, along with every other empire that had once ruled without challenge, were not prepared for what was coming next. The humans had awakened something they did not fully understand, and the fear of it was now spreading like wildfire. Back on Earth, As news of the galaxy's reaction to the fall of the Droo Empire reached Earth's leaders, Dr. Miles and General Roland shared a look of concern. The Zorathians weren't the only ones watching. Other galactic powers would undoubtedly begin to take action. Humanity's moment of victory might soon be overshadowed by new threats. The very power that had been their salvation could now become their greatest danger. "We need to prepare," Roland said, turning toward the group of leaders. "We've won, yes, but this is just the beginning. We've made enemies, whether we realize it or not. The galaxy will come after us. The question is, how will we face them?" Dr. Miles nodded, her face serious. "We've only begun to understand the pulse. We need to know more before we use it again. But we must be ready. If the galaxy comes for us, we will have to fight, and we will need every advantage we can get." In the days that followed, Earth's leadership worked tirelessly to prepare for the next phase. They began refining their understanding of the pulse, researching its limitations and potential applications. But for all their progress, they knew one thing for certain. The Droo were gone, but humanity had made its mark on the galaxy. The Zor and other empires would not rest until they had found a way to either stop humanity or claim its power for themselves. The galaxy, once thought to be ruled by the strongest, had just experienced a dramatic shift. Humanity had proven itself a force to be reckoned with. But now, the galaxy would come to find that the true test of humanity's strength would not be in their victory over the Droo, but in how they would face the galaxy's inevitable retaliation. The fall of the Droo Empire had only just begun to echo throughout the stars, and humanity's fight for survival was far from over. The stage was set for a new era, one that would define the future of the galaxy itself.